Hello everyone, my name's Daniel Ross and I'm a proud Wurundjeri man. I don't know if I like this though, it seems a little too colonial. As I said, I'm a proud Wurundjeri man, and today you gather on my ancestors' home, my home, and what an amazing place it is. I had to do a welcome not too long ago, and I had to rush to this one, and they gave me 5 minutes. But I told them I need a little bit longer because our story starts at the beginning of time. And Bunjil is our creator, the wedge-tailed eagle. He created everything we see, from the stars in the sky to the roots of the trees in the ground. And those roots of the trees intertwine their roots, like our knowledge systems, through millennia. Bunjil taught us how to care for country, how to listen, how to care for one another. And it's not always easy to stop and pause, but some of those old laws set by Bunjil, poor neat, I think you fellas call it spring, but when the wattle blooms, we stop and we check in on our old people. Last year we lost some significant elders during poor neat, but it's not all bad happenings. We see yam daisies coming into season, tadpoles in ponds. He also taught us when to listen to take food. And if you're lucky enough to be out in the country and you look at the Milky Way, you'll see that it resembles an emu standing up on the horizon. And when it stands up on the horizon, Pop tells me I could take the eggs. But as the emu lays down, the father's gone to nest, and you don't take the egg. So there's some of the laws set by Bunjil. We've got Wah, the crow. He brought us fire. It's an amazing thing, learning how to cook. But a couple of, 235 years ago, everything we knew would change forever. Is it for the better? I'm still undecided. But we're forced off what was home, the MCG, a place of Tandarim, ceremony, dance, a gathering place, decimated for a sporting field. Then eventually, Bolam Billabong, that place there is amazing. If you ever get a chance to stop in the midst of all the works that we call North East Link, you'll be surprised by the serenity. You can't hear a piece of plant or machinery, just like our old people did. But the squatters wanted that too. So we're forced off again. And that's when they established Coranderrk, the mission, Healesville. Uncle Billabulary, though, our Narragansett at Healesville, Coranderrk, negotiated the first treaty with John Batman. 12 axes, a few blankets, and a couple of bags of rice. And the Crown said, they're not worth that much. But at that signing were two young fellas, Uncle Simon Wonga and Uncle William Barak. And if any of you are fortunate enough to visit the shrine and look towards Carlton, you'll see Uncle Barak's face standing 24 stories tall, still overlooking country today. Uncle Barak advocated tirelessly to ensure we got a paycheck, because we weren't allowed to get paid on the mission until we learnt to read and write English, but we weren't allowed to speak our native tongue. So if any of you speak a language other than English, I implore you to teach your children so you don't suffer that travesty of loss of culture through language. But Uncle Barak gave my great-grandmother a tribal name, Bullum, white butterfly. How many people have paused and watched the butterfly in the garden? Gentle, caring. The old people have got a way of knowing. Nan went on to be instrumental in the opening of the first health service for Indigenous people right here in Victoria. 1967, we had a referendum and we voted yes, Aboriginal people are human. I don't know about that. We've got places here in Victoria that have human occupation at over 120,000 years on Gunditjmara country down in Warrnambool. Then I started school not too long after that. I turned 21 last week. I wish. Somebody made me aware of how old I am because I said Spencer Street Station. And those that are a little bit older will understand what I'm talking about. And they go, oh, no, that's Southern Cross. I go, what? That's Spencer Street. Well, I started school as a proud little boy Aboriginal boy. If you had to ask me what my skin colour was, I probably would have told you it was black. But my first day of school was traumatic. I went to share my stories with my peers, and just as some of those stories I've shared with you today, and I was pulled apart, told I wasn't Aboriginal because I was white. I had my identity stripped from me, broken. I went home, cried. And my pop, who's a senior elder, pulled me aside. They're very wise, these old fellas. I don't know how they got there. Hopefully I'm there one day. And he sat me down and he explained the reason I was fair and my cousins weren't was because I was born in the daytime and they were born at night. But as I got older, they told me the truth, and it was because we didn't know where our families were put on the mission that we were encouraged not to date other Aboriginal girls. But it's not about dwelling on those terrible happenings of the past. Sure, we need to acknowledge them. But those laws set by Bunjil at the beginning of time reign true, and the way we listen and come together as one is more important than dwelling on the past of those atrocities so we don't repeat them again. I'd like to start by acknowledging my elders, my ancestors. And I'd like to pause and acknowledge you and your elders past and present, and to any other First Nations here tonight. I'd like to welcome you all to my home, my ancestors' home. Woman Jika Wurundjeri Bullock, Yemen Gundibek. In the Woiwurrung language, I just said, welcome to the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. Nungojin, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Trent McCarthy. I'm one of the 9 councillors here at the City of Darebin, and I'd like to start off by acknowledging all of you, and in a moment also do an important acknowledgement of country too. But I'd like to thank you, first of all, for joining us for another fantastic Fuse event. How do I follow that? I'm just going to do my best. I'd like to start off by acknowledging the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered here today, and to recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and acknowledge all First Nations people who are here with us this evening. I'd also particularly like to acknowledge Daniel Ross, and thank you, Daniel, for that warm and I think very connecting and engaging welcome. I think it's so wonderful not only to hear a welcome to country, but also to hear about our personal stories and our journeys. And for me, I'm certainly reflecting on what Fuse is as a festival that gives us the opportunity to not only platform artists and performers, but also provide a space for reflection in that way. I'd also like to acknowledge the Darebin Council staff from the Arts and Culture, the Creative Culture team who are here this evening and who have put on tonight's event. They're a fabulous bunch of human beings, and they do great work, and so I would really like to just ask you to please help me in giving them a bit of a round of applause and a thank you for all the work that they do. And I'm going to get in a world of trouble because that's not in the script and they never let me do that, but I did it anyway. So Fuse is Darebin's biannual arts festival. It celebrates our unique talents and embraces a myriad of cultures and perspectives, profiling our municipality as a vibrant, inclusive, creative and contemporary city. This year's program includes our very first Fuse Artist Keynote Address. And guess what? You are the very first audience at our very first Fuse Keynote Artist Address, so well done. It's my great pleasure tonight to introduce Matt Watson to present Regional Echoes, From Yabbies to Freeform Synthesis, a compelling discussion on his journey from growing up in rural Victoria to discovering a life in music, modular synthesizers and experimental sound. Matt is now a Darebin-based musician, so he's started somewhere else but has chosen this place to live, and whose work spans experimental, improvisational and traditional forms. He has an extensive list of past and ongoing artist collaborations locally and internationally, and has performed at arts and music festivals, galleries and theatres in Australia, Japan and America. His work involves utilising modular synthesizers and drums for composition, recording, performance, collaboration and teaching. He is a member of Ollie Olsen's seminal drone project, Taipan Tiger Girls, and releases solo records under a variety of aliases, and I'm hoping tonight that he'll share with us some of those aliases that you may or may not know. Matt is currently working with Ella Hooper and developing new performance works for his Heavy Spectra ensemble, along with a plethora of other collaborations. I trust you will enjoy hearing about Matt's incredible body of work and are curious to ask some great questions during the Q&A, so start thinking about those now. Please join me in putting your hands together, and please welcome to the stage Matt Watson.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thanks so much, thank you. Thank you. Firstly, thank you to Daniel Ross for that beautiful introduction and welcome to country. And thank you to Councillor McCarthy for a very warm introduction as well. Thank you to the whole Fuse team for this opportunity. I'm eternally grateful to be included in this year's amazing festival lineup and extremely excited to present this year's inaugural Fuse Keynote address. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to start out by acknowledging the Woiwurrung, Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin nations where I live and work. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, water and community. I pay my respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. I'd also like to acknowledge that today is actually Close the Gap Day, which supports Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health equality. If you are in a position to do so, you can donate to this cause at oxfam.org.au. A percentage of any CD sales I sell tonight will go to that, and I've also made a personal contribution this morning as well. It's a really important day, and it's definitely not lost on me to be on stage here presenting tonight. So now we are here. And in another twist of the story, it seems I'm now a public speaker. Yeah. I wasn't born with this haircut, and I really, really hope that tonight's presentation lands for everyone. In fact, I need it to land well, so thank you for being here. I don't normally get nervous in front of crowds, certainly when I'm playing music. There was a point in my past where nerves turned to pure excitement. But tonight's a little different for me. So I do sometimes get nervous in front of small groups of people, truck stops, people eating steaming hot food in the sunshine, bright lights in the lounge room, definite no-no, and apprehensive road crosses, there's a few in here I think, and really anything to do with TikTok, which I abhor, but I will give myself a pass tonight. Before we get started, I'm just going to do a couple of things. All right, little palate cleanser. I do like to make sounds with these machines. So this talk is not really about my practice, and it's not really about these machines either. My name is Matt Watson, and I make sounds with drums and synthesizers. I make music as a solo artist and with other musicians collaboratively. I've played in bands, toured, and collaborated on many large-scale unconventional ensembles for drums and electronics. The bulk of my practice is based around experimental electronic music using the instruments that you see here, but not exclusively. I love to play a role in bringing other people's music to life as well. I've lived in and hung around the city of Darebin for a big chunk of the past 29 years, including several garages and various other appalling share houses. I moved to the city from a small country town fresh out of Year 12 to pursue a career in music. So these northern suburbs now feel a little like home, though as a friend said recently, I'm probably never really going to feel at home down here. and that's something I finally made my peace with. Along with playing the drums, I love working with modular synthesizers. I love staring into their panels, searching for answers and dreaming up new ways to move sound around. I've learnt over many years that they have a capacity to inspire new ways of thinking, both for the creator and listener, with benefits that go far beyond any musical pursuit. They seem to be an extension of listening and hearing, and they reflect the sounds of my past and signal to my future simultaneously. I found myself through these instruments. Now, despite what it looks like, I'm not going to talk too much about these instruments specifically, and I'm no showboat. This presentation might be a little different from what you're expecting. My goal tonight is to share a little bit about myself, my history and my practice. I hope to mount a convincing case that these instruments have the capacity to make us better people. I will challenge the idea that these instruments are merely ornamental sound generators to serious forms of music, and I'll ask the question, what is the measure of artistic success? I promise to be my authentic self. I will attempt to make sense of my own path from yabbing and fishing as a kid. There I am. Through to composing, curating and conducting Magnitudes, a world-first performance for the Mess Synthesizer Orchestra at the Sydney Myer Music Bowl. If you were to suggest to the young boy me, thank you. If you were to suggest to me as a kid that I might have done any of this at any point in my life, I'm not sure that I would have had an answer. Maybe, I don't know, or a bit far-fetched, or something like that. I don't know. I still say I don't know. To be clear, I'm not stuck in the past. I'm just interested in how lives fit together. An hour is not really long enough to cover everything, so there'll be omissions, time warps, and non sequiturs. And I may require some audience participation at times, so please watch for the signs. You'll know them when they appear. I have zero evidence to suggest that I should be the one presenting this keynote. I have no proof to support the idea that I'm on the right path. I have no real historical connection to the arts, music, my interests, all these instruments. I came into this city as a naive, wide-eyed teenager in January of 1994, ill-prepared for the city. And at times I still feel like that same teenager trying to find my place down here. No connections to the city and no safety net if things don't work out. It's sink or swim, buddy. And I think that's not an uncommon position for most human beings, really. To fail at finding my place is to turn away and head back to the country, realising that I couldn't cut it in the city. My mother tells me on regular occasions that it's hard for younger people to forge a life for themselves back home. I'm not exactly young anymore, but the point is clear. Move forward, not back. I have no academic qualifications, bar an advanced certificate in music performance from Box Hill TAFE. I do have a loving partner, Elizabeth, a 7-year-old cat named Jeffrey, and still entertain the idea that I might do a Bachelor of Arts degree once I finally decide what I want to do with my life. So, is this going to be a tale of class and struggle, flawed intuition and dumb luck built on country naivety? Is this a story of a country boy done good, an underdog having a few wins? Or am I about to tell you a rags to riches story? Is that right? Or are these just the words of my overactive imposter syndrome at play? Yes. Thank you. Thanks for that affirmation. I guess it's easy to create a convenient narrative to make sense of our own position in life. This narrative helps us to try and make sense of the universal chaos we all ultimately live in. I work very hard to keep mine in check. That universal chaos is somehow embodied in these machines. On accepting the offer to present, I asked myself the question, what do I really have to offer? Is my practice really that unique? And what even is a practice? Why do so many people have intersections in their practice? Why can't people make their mind up? I guess it is hard to be objective when I've developed much of my practice and interests alone over a long period of time. I've always found it tricky to understand my place in the city. I grew up long before home computers and mobile phones connected us to the whole world. Learning meant reading books or listening to someone with experience, and that wasn't always available, unless you were lucky enough to be connected to the right people. I turned a circle around with my index finger if I needed to make a phone call, and that was connected to the kitchen wall, and sometimes it was a painful process. Remember, it used to get stuck in your fingers? Everyone knew everyone in town, and as a kid, you may not have known the person in front of you, but they sure as hell knew your parents. Friends were just people we knew who weren't dickheads, and we still thought of the dickheads as friends. But it was really simple. We couldn't wait to head off fishing and camping in the bush on weekends, or a day trip to Ararat or Horsham to check out the shops. The biggest thing I could think of as a young kid was getting to ride a motorbike, going skateboarding, building a bush jump over a creek bed, maybe buying a hotted up Holden one day, which I actually did in 2001, amazingly. I drew cartoons and played cricket in the street with my brother Peter. Hostile Maniac was a book I wrote and illustrated which told the story of a crew of Mad Max-styled thugs burning around the beach in a dune buggy. I was in grade 6. These thoughts don't exactly signpost a straight-line career trajectory to where I am today. On those straight-line trajectories, I'm not sure many of us have them. A life well lived featured wonky lines, triumphant peaks, static and noisy moments, and many pointy bits. In my search for meaning, I turned to Kurt Vonnegut's Arc of a Story lecture to try and make sense of these lines. Had a thing, lost a thing, got the thing back. Never had a thing, and then it got worse, and then I became a bug. That's not a good lifeline, but you know. I ended up realising that my path isn't easily drawn out, nor can it be easily connected together, and it's most definitely non-linear. At its weirdest, like an alternative reality ballooning off the current one, where I get everything right or wrong, or whatever it is that mirrors whatever it is that's going right or wrong at any given time. I'm definitely not qualified to talk about quantum physics. I think most of us in the room tonight probably feel the same way, no matter what our background is. How did I get from here to here, or there to here? I found myself in some incredibly weird, wonderful, and at times confusing situations in my pursuit of a life in music. I've always followed a type of internal intuition, which has led to a few chance meetings and collaborations. And it's these very moments that have helped to set up the life and career I now have. This intuition was born out of a need to survive in the city and a deep need to find that something we're all searching for. So now I'm here and I realise it only takes one person to say yes to change your life. What is it that I'm hoping to find? What is the measure of success, and what am I really looking for? Why my story? I think tonight's story is much like your story, relatively speaking, but maybe with a few added yabbies and synthesizers. In a world that's quick to judge, it is a rare opportunity that we get to tell our story. Our stories transcend many of the everyday things that keep us separated and at times at odds with one another. Taking time to really listen to each other reveals just how much we share, and that the things that are unique to us can be points of connection and celebration. We all have our personal stories with their own shapes, colours, smooth moments, pointy bits, and lots of reflections. These are the things that drive us forward. So now I've set the scene and I realise that once again, I've put myself into a rather critical situation in front of you all. Thank you for being here. I hope my meandering tales bring a smile to your face tonight. Feel free to laugh and respond in any way that you feel. No judgment here. But just remember, it's my show. So welcome. Thank you. Thanks for being here. I'd like to dedicate tonight's presentation to my mum and dad, my brother and my brother's family, my grandparents, my aunties, uncles and cousins on both sides of the family, and my in-laws, and to my hometown specifically. Tonight's keynote address is titled Regional Echoes from Yabbies to Freeform Synthesis. Before I get into what it is that I do, I want to share a little bit about where I'm from. I come from a small town called Stawell, or Europe in language, on Jab Wurrung country. It's located near Garryward, which is the Grampians National Park, and has a population of about 6,000 people. The natural environment is rich with the sounds of cockatoos and the wind blowing through the gum trees, and amazing clear skies when it's not cloudy. This beautiful sonic landscape is offset against 3 p.m. explosions that echo from the gold mine tunnels beneath the town. Our summers are dry and hot, and the winters are frosty and clear. I grew up riding my bike to Bunjil Shelter in the nearby Black Ranges with my brother and friends. It was a semi-regular thing. I loved that place, but had little idea of the significance it had for traditional owners of the land. I'm forever thankful for being raised on those sacred lands. Right up till the end of the 1900s, knowledge about traditional owners of the land that we called home was not taught to us, and we didn't really understand where to begin learning. We were disconnected from the rich culture and history which surrounded us. I now take it upon myself to listen and learn and look to the wisdom of traditional owners to enrich myself with knowledge and gain a deeper understanding of and respect of the place I call home. I acknowledge the suffering inflicted by our presence and our colonial past. Stawell was established in the 1850s as a colonial settlement during the gold rush. Mining ceased in the 1930s before starting up again when I was a little boy. Stawell seems to emanate a feeling of boom or bust, settle or escape. To me now, it represents a sense of arrival, home, healing place. It is known for hosting the world's richest foot race, which began 140 years ago. And each year, I wonder why the need to run. From what? It has a strong farming community, a few remaining pubs, netball and footy teams, and a solid attendance at the trots and races. We have a couple of beautiful freshwater lakes nearby, though they've been empty till just recently. Not quite the tropical island resort memory I had as a kid. At the centre of town is the town hall, built in 1872 and completed in 1939. It has motorised gold rush era miners positioned high on the bell towers, which animate the digging and sifting of gold every hour, on the hour between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. to the sound of the town hall bells playing with a swag upon his shoulder. This old folk poem was made famous by the Seekers. It talks of boom and bust in the gold digging, surviving in the bush, hoping for a fortune, and maybe to make it to Ballarat, Geelong, and even Melbourne. This tune is embedded in my DNA. It's like a call to prayer. I was born into its sounds, which could be heard all over town, every hour on the hour between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. This song is a soundtrack to our sleepy little town, yet for the most part I think it goes unnoticed. I can't help but think this tune has somehow sculpted my own trajectory from birth. Could the Stawell Town Hall actually be a data centre responsible for subversively programming the community psyche? A little more on that later. Yes. My dad was a shearer, now retired. He shore sheep for a little over 48 years full-time without so much as a sick day, and rarely, if ever, took a holiday. His dad was a shearer as well. Dad took me and my brother Peter to the sheds as young kids. We tread the boards, sweeping up wool as best we could as young kids, and dags, and loved helping out the cockies pen the next lot of sheep. These sounds and smells defined my childhood. I loved the drone of the shears. Dad claimed Australian strong wool champion in the 1990s, which was a big prize for Aussie shearers. Back-breaking and competitive work in extreme conditions. I learnt about unions and strike action early in life. The shearers' strike of the early 1980s was a dynamic period and emotions ran hot. Let's not open the wide comb debate again. My mum was a council carer for the elderly after spending her teenage years working at Mitchell's Haberdashery in the main street and looking after us kids. She spent her life looking after people in need, showering, cleaning and providing good company for the many elderly folks. In retirement, my dad still loves yabbying and fishing. They both still work full-time, gardening and caring for others, and they love the life that their kids have created for themselves. Our family holidays were in a tent in the bush up near Weeman on the Murray River, which is about 30 minutes from Robinvale, pretty kind of a remote spot. Or at one of the nearby lakes, and once a year Mum and Dad loved to take us somewhere new in the Holden. Kingswood, Commodore, there was various Holdens, Gemini. These were simple pleasures. We spent our time fishing and yabbing and getting ready for the next meal. The sound of cockatoos at dawn and Dad prepping his fishing lines as the fire crackled are forever etched in my mind, reminding me of what home and happiness sound like. I learnt to drive at 7, smoked a ciggy at 8, I shot a gun at 9 and started my first job at 10. Not an uncommon trajectory for a young boy in the bush learning about risk and responsibility. I started playing the drums at 13. Yeah, that guy. I worked 2 jobs to get my first drum set, which is that one in that picture. I cleaned a meat truck on weekends and stocked the drink fridges at the milk bar after school. 2 jobs. I had my first drum lesson from a local legend named Sleepy. He drove a Bedford van, sang like Barnesy, and played drums like Mick Fleetwood. He was my first mentor. I made friends with Macca, Youngie, Spider, and various other people in year 7, and started a band the year after. Youngie's old man was a butcher and had a set of Rogers drums, which seemed really exotic at the time. Just as a side note, the Rogers drums are kind of gorgeous vintage drums. So Youngie's old man, he was a superstar drummer in town, and he let me use his drums for practice, for band practice. It always felt special. Felt like I was on my way. I think he knew the Shantuzis. I listened to Iron Maiden, Guns N' Roses, and Metallica. Our band found early controversy playing Anarchy in the UK at a school assembly. The teachers shut the PA off mid-song. I liked the reaction it got, but I didn't really understand the meaning of the song. Our high school disco was the first experience we had with a stage and loud music. I have very fond memories of Countdown TV personality Tanya Lacey hosting a school social. I believe the school, one of the groups in the school raised money to pay Tanya Lacey a lot of money to come and host our social. It was a weird thing, but anyway. I remember she gave some of the boys a kiss on the cheek, but they had to line up. True. I was too shy. I loved watching Beyond 2000, which was a TV show about the future, and Doctor Who. We hired videos and the video player, for that matter, to watch flickery versions of Beverly Hills Cop and Missing in Action, Cannonball Run, and Star Wars. And smacking the top of the tally had little effect on the quality of those viewing experiences. The girls in our year were obsessed with the movies Dirty Dancing and Roadhouse, featuring Patrick Swayze. I think they dreamt of the day a boy like Patrick would walk through the doors. And, yeah, we were no chop on that guy. Didn't they understand that these films were classic tales of class struggle and toxic masculinity? We were being told in no uncertain terms, this is what they want from us. Is that what I was supposed to be? We were being culturally encoded to the sounds of Bon Jovi, Poison, the Choir Boys and the Angels, while learning to dance to the Nutbush and the bus stop. And it seemed like all the girls wanted us to be their Swayze. To quote Chrissy Amphlett, get me out of here. Our end-of-year concert became an opportunity to express ourselves. Our band played Sepultura, Helmet, and the theme to Melrose Place. Our buddy Richie stepped into the role as singer. Oh, yeah, he tried his luck. I think he did all right. I don't know if Richie's here tonight. He said he was going to come. And I played a big double-kick drum solo at the end to arousing applause. The seeds were planted early. I'm not sure when I started to think of Melbourne as my future. It most likely coincided with family day trips to the city. Brash's music store in the CBD was always the first stop, and I ogled the drum kits and cassettes for hours in a daydream. Ararat was the nearest city to us, and it was a city because it had a set of traffic lights. In my mind, Melbourne was Mecca. Ghana, Melbourne this weekend was a signal to others that you were getting out to do something better than them. And kids in the know offered warnings about travelling with tapes in your boot. They'll get wiped. This I knew for sure, and it filled me with worry any time I spent my meat truck money on a music video or cassette. I hung on to anything that reflected my musical future, the musical future I was innocently planning for myself. This future was being mapped out from the band flyers I was collecting from the Melbourne music stores I visited. I learnt where bands played, the Sarah Sands and the Central Club. I saw hordes of cool-looking young kids on the steps of Flinders Street. Some had mohawks. They must be going to the Sarah Sands. Cool. maybe future friends. I felt fearless travelling to the Big Smoke at 14, especially when I began doing it alone. Our family was not at home in the big city. I faked it, and some might say I still am. I clearly remember the day I told my parents that I was planning to be a professional drummer. I reckon I was in year 9, Mum cried and Dad was angry. There was no precedent for such radical thought. Strong imaginations were often misunderstood and misclassified. Get a trade and settle down. My parents were very, very supportive of me. And this is told through the lens of a very young teenager. So after that bombshell occurred, there was nothing but support throughout my life. By this stage, there was a murmur amongst my skater mates about jumping ship to go and work for big money in the abattoirs, or escape to a mate's brothers joining Coffs Harbour to get out in the fishing boats and earn a ton of cash, or go work in the mine here or up north or west, just for a while. Make enough money to start your own nightclub. I watched my mates split school without warning, not to be seen again. Whilst it wasn't far from what might be an accepted career path, I knew that I wanted to finish school and meet Primus and Metallica one day. The idea of moving to the city was high on my agenda. Was it the hourly call from the bell tower? Subconsciously, had I been programmed to find my goal to move to the city? That song was sad and big and took up a lot of sonic space in town. I needed to find my own sonic space. Melbourne seemed to ooze sonic potential, though I had zero idea of how to find it. So fast forward, and I'm 17 years old as I complete year 12. We spent the final couple of years at high school frequenting the local pubs when we weren't at school, playing pool in the sports bar, mostly being left alone by the police. For some reason, a bar full of teenagers was no call for concern in town. Everyone knew where we were, and all was as it should be. Mum and Dad drove me to my room and board in Blackburn a month later. I had no idea what to do. I found Triple R and listened to their metal show. I had just had my last big family holiday up the Murray and caught a few nice fish, though still no Murray cod. I had a week of work experience at Mackin's drum shop in Caulfield during year 11, and I got to meet the legendary drummer Pete Luscombe. That was huge. Now I live in the city, and I'm thrust into Melbourne to study jazz and contemporary performance at Box Hill TAFE. I didn't even really know what jazz was. Everything was new and everything was blowing my mind. Box Hill had a recording studio and teachers who introduced me to wild music like Tangerine Dream and Wah Wah Watson, a MIDI notator software which might replace real musicians one day. There's a massive fear as a drummer that you're going to be replaced, which ultimately we kind of all were. And new friends who made me mixtapes filled with soul funk classics. I was getting sophisticated quickly, reprogrammed as it was. No more hard rock, buddy. This is where the gold is. And everyone in the course seemed to shred. I was still tanging the hump, which I soon learnt was not a city-minded approach to the drums. Not if I wanted to be cool, which I did. Has there anyone heard that term before, tanging the hump? Can I demonstrate it? You're going to know it straight away. All right, here we go. So, just think of a big, weekend rock covers band, like this. Tanging the hump. The hump is the bell of the ride, and the tang is the hitting of the bell. It's a very, very common style of playing in certain areas of the world. Quite a regional approach to playing drums, I guess, which is not a bad thing. Where was I? So I should also credit that term to Lawrence Pike. I did a bunch of digging to find out where that term came from because I was quite in love with it. And we eventually got there through multiple people, through I think Ashley Naylor and various other people. There was a chain of conversations through various rock luminaries in Melbourne to find out that it was Lawrence Pike who coined that term. So thank you, Lawrence. Okay, back to the story. I felt out of my element and overwhelmed as I searched for these city people who would soon become my new best friends. They held the secrets. They knew where the gold was, and I needed their help to unlock what Melbourne was hiding. I began to examine my past as I fell into city life. Swag upon his shoulder was not to be heard down here. Mum kept loading me up with bath towels and shot glasses as a support to this new life I was forging. I was going to the Punters Club and the Empress now, and those people seemed to know what was up. My upbringing felt completely alien to the new people I was knocking around with. So many of the people I discovered seemed to appear fully formed, like they knew what was up right from birth. Were they born with great style and attitude? It's kind of seemed like that. Cafe lattes and scrambled eggs and social gatherings talking about sophisticated art music and rave parties. For real? Food wasn't fancy where I came from, and music was hard and heavy. You ate because you needed to, not because you wanted to enjoy it. Avocados didn't exist when I grew up. You shook hands with people and said g'day at a distance. I was thrust into the fancy suburban houses of transient city friends and jazz-scented, dreadlocked share houses in North Fitzroy, coffee machines and hugs from people I hardly knew. My hard music wasn't welcome, so I tossed it out. The world was turning upside down, and if I wanted to find the gold, I better get with the program. I wore undersized t-shirts and primary coloured parkas. That should unlock the city I was searching for. I'm really glad that we didn't have social media or smartphones. Really glad. I think most people probably feel that as well. I joined my first Melbourne band at 18. Acid Jazz was taking over Fitzroy in 1994, and I was in the hot seat. I quickly pivoted from metal to jazz funk, and somehow I pulled it off and got my groove on. Early mentions in the legendary Darebin-based magazine Drum Scene signalled a bright future ahead. I was making it. Yay, drum scene. Still going. I felt like I was making it. I hung out with Daryl Braithwaite one night and got backstage at a Tina Arena concert thanks to my incredibly kind drum teacher, John Corniola, the brother of Frank, who started Drum Scene and also Drum Tech. My musical journey was underway and I did not look back. It wasn't long before a crevice began to appear, which seemed to splice right between the music career I was forming and the music I truly loved. During this period, I was searching for cheap studio gear. As a kid, I remember calling the Wimmera Music Centre in Horsham every week to ask how much their Tascam 4-track tape recorder was, literally every week. I think I knew their phone number off by heart. What would I even do if I got it? I definitely didn't have the $1 million I needed in 1990. So fast forward, and I'm on my own in the city. I purchased a Korg Mini 700 synthesizer for $230. Korg's first mono-synth from the early 1970s. I was in love with it the moment I saw the coloured switches and heard its rich alien sound. And I have been known to talk about the clicky switches on that as well. The silver ones down the end, they click, and every click sounds like a walnut crack. It's delicious. I began messing around with that synth, making drones and weird effects. It sounded juicy and alive, like it was designed to make the soundtracks of the sci-fi shows I loved as a kid. I made very funny synth funk tracks on a very crappy 4-track recorder. My stallmates found them amusing, but I dare not play them to anyone else. And I didn't progress openly with my own music until many, many years later. I spent the rest of the 1990s playing in bands of all styles, getting my first taste of playing with samplers and sequencers, recording for a brief moment with Tony Cohen, and watched on in awe as transient friends created expensive digital studios. And in the end, I flew a little too close to the sun. Big lessons require some time to process. A spell in intensive care in Southeast Asia, followed by a car accident upon my return, was enough to send me into a rather introspective place for a few years. I stocked up on Herman Hesse books and classic self-help manuals, shaved my head, and started to question everything. I surrendered my session drumming days to a job as an LP cleaner at a second-hand record store. Maybe the goal was there. The idea of being in a band ceased to be a priority. I learned at this time that my feelings about music lived somewhere else. As I woke up to the history of recorded sound, I began to listen differently. As I look back, the sounds of recorded music dating back to the earliest 20th century mechanical recordings sprang to life. These sounds were exploding off the record player straight from the source, and I found it completely compelling. I wasn't so much concerned with who was on the disc, rather completely mesmerised by its sound and the culture of the time that each record was produced. Like looking into the far reaches of space and time, the sounds of the earliest recorded music was as inspiring to me as the most artistically proficient mind working within the far outer reaches of experimental sound. This was now my job. Cool. I began hunting for the sounds in between, and as my taste and knowledge grew, modular synthesizers started to feel like some type of endpoint. The albums that featured these machines completely activated my mind and imagination. I was not of the music I had been playing prior. Who was I? If jazz and funk wasn't me, and I wanted more than to slot into a life of just playing in rock bands, then what was the music that fitted me? I was still coming to terms with what these modular machines were. But I knew that Morton Subotnick was blowing my mind, as was Laurie Spiegel and the recordings of theremin icon Clara Rockmore. These were the most alien yet familiar sounds I'd ever encountered. Just as a side note, there was a gateway release for a lot of people in the very, very early 2000s called OHM, O-H-M. And it was a 3 CD box set with a DVD, and it pretty much has a definitive introduction to experimental sound. This period of growth served to bridge my interest in outsider music across all genres and my strict drumming education. But the question was, how could I ever marry the two? My drums were taking on a different shape and meaning. No longer were they purely a tool for timekeeping in bands. I began to see them the way they were originally conceived, as an orchestra in and of themselves, a collection of instruments rather than a single thing. I began exploring ideas of shape over time as my drums began to feel free, I should say. How would a drummer play to Ligeti? So if people are unfamiliar with Ligeti, just think 2001: A Space Odyssey, those big, dense, floating tones and floating sounds. I began exploring the tones and the edges of the drums, using different apparatus or different sticks in different ways to activate the drum sounds. I can give a quick demonstration if you'd like to hear. This was kind of like a revelatory moment for me when I stopped tanging the hump, which I did before, and started to think more in terms of what each drum could offer. You know, each drum and each cymbal has just an infinite variety of sounds. I'm not here to kind of go too deep into this, so I'll just give you a quick demonstration of what I'm talking about. So you can hear that leaning into those sounds kind of opened and unlocked the drums a little. Obviously, I was still playing in time then. It's still very like a kind of a metric feel. But that as a gateway into understanding what the drums can offer, particularly as you move into a more free form style of playing, it very much unlocked everything, and just my brain went. So electronic sound and experimental music seemed to offer a chance to escape and create my own world. These machines, including the drums, actually, not some more of these machines, were like an extension of listening and hearing, and my drums were opening up in a sea of colour. I had fallen in love with these in-between sounds and the freedom that modular synthesizers promised. It seemed if I could get my hands in one, it would be a ticket to a rebirth of sorts. Then I met Ollie. In a chance encounter via an online message forum, I became acquainted with Australian underground music legend Ollie Olsen. There were a few steps in between, but that is essentially how it happened. Ollie was incredibly influential in my evolution as an artist. Early on, after hearing some of my new music, before I'd released anything, in Ollie's way, he looked at me very calmly with the smile that Ollie has, and he said, "You choose music or you choose art." And for me, that was a really profound statement. I felt like my third eye was squeegeed. His influence and friendship was immediate. Our first gig together led to a live album in 2006 titled The Mechanical Eye, which was recorded with our mutual friend Chris Rainier. It was here that I revealed my pure leanings towards experimental music, and doorways opened immediately. And it was here that Ollie introduced me to, and then subsequently sold me the Synthy AKS. This instrument changed my life. That one in the middle there. So the Synthy is a gorgeous machine from the very early 1970s. It's highly sought after now, but when I got it, the world was not really locked into the synthesizer madness it is today. If you knew, you knew. It's a modular system, meaning it has separate components that you make connections to create your own system out of. But you are only limited to what you see on the panel. This instrument very much defines what I love about synthesizers and synthesis. And to quote Ollie, it's like painting with sound. There's a freedom with these machines to shape the sounds in any way that you can imagine. With the AKS, you're kind of confined to its sound palette, and you're confined to the limited ingredients. But fundamentally, it's a very free instrument. It unlocks a lot. As I said, I'm not here to give a workshop on these instruments, on what they do. I'm here to talk about my personal connection to them. If anyone's got any questions after, I'm always happy to go down that spiral, so we can chat afterwards. Here's an early recording of the first work I created with the Synthy AKS, way back in 2007. It's a track called Daybreaks. So this new era of experimentation saw me obsessed with recording my own music. There was something about the freedom of that piece when I started to work with it that just, again, unlocked a lot of just this free flow of like, oh, I turn it on, and every time I turn it on, it sounded amazing. I didn't feel like I had to necessarily practice in the way you might as a singer or as a guitarist or even as a drummer. So my project, Other Places, formed on the back of those early experiments. And it formed with the idea to create music which sounded like the BBC Radiophonic Workshop jamming with Keith Moon. The BBC Radiophonic Workshop was very much at the... there we go. Basically responsible for subversively ushering in a lot of experimental sound to the mainstream without the mainstream ever really knowing what they were hearing. So if anyone's not aware of the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, the easiest thing to think of is those early Doctor Who episodes and the sound effect of the Dalek or any of the ambient, weird textural sounds. It was made with, they created sounds like that. Anyway, I won't go down that rabbit hole. And Keith Moon was the drummer of The Who. He was the wild alcoholic who just played like he was on fire. My new music had a little swagger and spoke to many of the themes I'm talking about tonight. It was more in tune with a krautrock approach than a dance music approach. Krautrock being kind of late 60s, early to mid 70s German progressive music, which spawned Kraftwerk and Harmonia and Neue and stuff like that. My intentions for this music was often misunderstood. I received some excellent support through R, PBS, FBI in Sydney. I got playlisted for like 5 months. It's amazing. Thank you, yeah. And from Germany through Deutsche Welle Radio, which was also another big moment. It was a 1-hour feature they did on me, and they paid me for the interview, which was kind of crazy. And also East Village Radio in New York City, which is a very famous New York City radio station. And that was literally just a dumb kid from out of town who knocked on the door to East Village Radio one day when I was in New York for the first time, thinking that that's how you might get played. And a lovely person by the name of Hannah Rad came to the door and was quite blown away at the tenacity I had of rocking up with a bag of CDs saying, "Can you play my shit?" Eventually I landed an LP release with Melbourne underground label It Records, and that was a big moment. It seemed like following my truth and instinct was revealing opportunities I had not thought possible for my own music. I'd spent years playing Frogger with my musical life, and it seemed simple now. Follow your truth. I released 3 albums as Other Places before I got little itchy feet and wanted to move on again. Here's an example of cool. That's an example of one of the tracks from my first record, recorded in 2009. I played and recorded everything, so that was me on drums and me on synths, and that whole album was made on the synth AKS and that drum kit. And I mixed it as well, probably to my peril, but anyway, I mixed it, and it was mastered by Byron Scullen. Yay! Or many years ago. On the back of all of this, I was finding my people. I was suddenly thrust back into playing drums, but this time with synth-focused bands and talking synthesizers all day. We toured Australian festival circuit and had a lot of fun. I also simultaneously struck up a musical relationship with Australian music legend Ella Hooper, after we toured together with Australian music royalty Deborah Conway. That was a big tour and a bit of a baptism by fire for me. I think Ella and I shared a little of that country synergy on that tour, and that connection continues today, and it's one that I value immensely. From then on, it's been a wild ride of solo works, collaborations, wild improv bands, of note being Taipan Tiger Girls, which was my band with Ollie Olsen and the very talented Dr. Lisa McKinney. And interestingly enough, opportunities to talk about these instruments that unlocked my life. What you're seeing now is a kind of a funny, as I look back on it now, it's kind of a bit cringy, but a very innocent video explanation of this machine from way back in early 2013 with Audio Technology magazine, and they did a feature on me in the magazine and asked me to do this video. And when they filmed this, I actually thought it was a demo run. I thought they were coming back to do the proper one. So the lighting is terrible, and I was very hungover. It's pretty embarrassing. I've been taken to task over a couple of my comments in the video on YouTube. It's kind of clocked over about 15 or 16,000 views at this point, so I just have to live with it now. and I embrace it, whatever. I've played with so many amazing people locally, in Japan and in the USA, and have been involved with many unconventional orchestras and played in many large-scale experimental shows with a long list of collaborators. I'm not kind of here to kind of grandstand my, all of the things that I've done. This is more about the story leading to this. So if you'd like to know more about any of that stuff, you can kind of Google me, I guess, or you can talk to me. I've got, a lot of that stuff is available. So, okay, so I'm just going to sidestep for a second. How should I phrase this question? Does everyone know what a synthesizer is? Yes, majority yes. Like, do these look like synthesizers to you? Should a synthesizer have a keyboard, like a black and white keyboard? Not necessarily, correct. I made mention of this a little bit before in respect to quoting Ollie, but these instruments kind of have more in common with an artist's paint palette than traditional musical instruments. When creating with them, the machine must share some of the compositional credit, and their output only really reflects the technical and conceptual understandings that I bring into the scenario, or the user brings into the scenario, or into the collaboration. When choosing to work with these machines, I find it's best to surrender to them and allow an interaction to form the work. And this is a little like meditation, i.e. a practice. And my practice is very much concerned, or very focused around the idea of the micro and the macro. I think in very, very little pieces, and then very big shapes, colours, and energy over time. I tend to lean into things that feel free. Not exclusively, but that's kind of where I feel like I get most excited, is that kind of flow of energy, whether I'm playing drums or working with these machines. So this is my modular setup. It's a Eurorack system, and Eurorack is all the rage now. You'll hear people talking about it often. Eurorack is just a format. It's just a size. It's a size. It's a format. So people of lots of different manufacturers build machines to fit into this one thing, like Lego or anything really. It's designed to kind of all fit together. My system here is a majority fractal system, which is a modern take on West Coast synthesis. So I'm not going to give you a history lesson, but if you want to understand this machine, you just have to turn your mind to the culture of mid to late 60s California. Just think about what was happening at that time. There was a lot of that going on. And this machine very much is a modern adaptation of it, and also it's a cheaper version because I can't afford the real thing. Anyone who has the real thing has got super deep pockets or very well funded, which I'm not. So to me, Eurorack as a format, it represents freedom and challenges the idea of what sound and music can be. The system allows for a complete customization of tools and sounds to create whatever it is that inspires you. When I say whatever within the realms of this world that we're talking about. They embody the entire history, Eurorack does, embodies the entire history of electronic sound generation, technique, concepts, all of it. It's all in these machines. And it really, for me anyway, it lays at the forefront of modern electronic sound creation, specifically when integrated with modern software and computer control. Okay, I'm going to do this. Just let's see what happens here. I think this one. Oop, other one. somewhere, and the thing I wanted to do is not happening, which is pretty usual with this stuff. That's gonna whirl away in the background, so you can just let that be the soundtrack to the next little bit. So a big part of my practice in recent years, specifically in recent times, involves the development and creation of graphic scores. We can't easily notate these instruments. They're free, like they don't have a fixed, it's a bit hard to say, try and notate whatever this is. All right, that sounds awesome to me, but how the hell would you kind of explain that to someone else? So I found, I think kind of happened quite naturally. I tended to use graphic elements when I was just, mapping a set together just so I could understand shape over time and stuff like that. I wouldn't have explained it so eloquently, but at the time, but that's kind of what I was doing. So we can't easily notate these instruments, and so graphic scores or using graphic symbols and graphic language can really help to bring some order to this chaos. They allow freedom to express our ideas. Up, down, big, small, tone, colour, whatever it is, conceptual, a conceptual work that you might conceive in your brain. It helps us to make some sense of these abstract sounds by utilising these visual languages to describe what we are hearing or what we want to hear. The more I work with graphic scores, the more I see my past appearing. The lines and shapes of the land I grew up in, and interestingly enough, many of the sounds are directly connected to that sonic landscape I grew up in. What you might hear as noise, I hear as home. So I have no idea how I ended up where I am. From stall town hall encoding, fishing, shearing sheds to here. A little naivety, a stroke of good luck, obsessive hard work, be it music related or those many grunt work jobs that I've done over the years have been a dominant part of my life. And I'd really be here for most of the night if I had to talk about all of them. When opportunities appear, they are only good opportunities if you are prepared. I spend my life creating and practicing for the day that may never appear. It keeps me focused and enthusiastic about life. Sometimes, though, it does feel like I'm just decorating time. Each year that goes by is a surprise to me, and I'm always amazed when opportunities appear. If you know me, you know I say thank you a lot. It is a very genuine response. Opportunities are gifts which I do not take for granted. If you have ever given me opportunity at any point for anything, then thank you again. Over the years, I've been incredibly fortunate to find my way into some remarkable situations. Some have reflected the lofty heights of artistic success, and others not so much. I'd say an early midlife crisis which saw me get my truck license to become a free living truck driver, in hindsight, was not quite the ticket to artistic freedom I'd been chasing. On leaving my casual record store job, I explored a childhood fantasy of being a long-haul big rig truck driver. I remember buying truck magazines as a little boy as well. We kind of, all that stuff, there was a magazine for everything. So the truck I drove wasn't quite a Kenworth, but it was still a sizable Iveco, requiring steely nerves to navigate amongst the B-doubles. I'd spent a lifetime in media work and had many failed attempts at entering the arts sector. And somehow I ended up in kids' entertainment. Really. Yes, really, kids' entertainment. That was me. That's another story. So by this point, I knew it was worth a shot. Age and rejection have a complex relationship. Those few years in the truck left me feeling burnt out, disconnected and lost. Desperately trying to keep my synthesizers and music in sight, but watching it drift away with every diesel refill. Dramatic, to be sure. Living and sleeping on the road amongst that community was an experience I won't forget. particularly the night I got hunted out by hunting dogs on a river north of Gundagai. I was sleeping in a swag on the river that night, and it was a terrifying experience. In mid-2018, after many unstable years, I stepped out of the truck and into the role of studio manager at the newly formed and now world-famous Melbourne Electronic Sound Studio. This was the dream-like synth studio mecca created by Robin Fox and Byron Scullen. It was a process to get there, but it seemed my synthesizer signalling to the world was paying off. To quote a legend from Little Things. This radical change in lifestyle was not lost on me. As the smell of diesel and desperation dissipated, I felt a sense of trust and belief reappear as I climbed back out of the hole I'd found myself in. If my record store job had been a degree in music history, then MESS was going to be my PhD. It was a formative time, allowing me to solidify these deeply instinctual ideas, turning them into a career. Dr. Watson, I presume. Not quite, but maybe close enough. The pinnacle of my time at MESS was Magnitudes, my composition for the MESS Synthesizer Orchestra at the Sydney Mime Music Bowl. It was with great trust and belief I was given this opportunity, and has become a defining part of my artistic life. A moment of condensed clarity in response to that one person who said yes. What a memorable night that was. It took place just in the little opening amongst a bunch of lockdowns, and I think it changed a lot of people's lives that night. I think for everyone on the bill, everyone that was part of that event, and yeah, all thanks to MESS. So MESS is an incredible organisation which supports so many people on their journey towards being a sustainable artist. It did for me, and I'm eternally grateful. So thank you, MESS. Yes. Life has been increasingly busy in recent years. I learned to back myself, realising if you don't back you, no one else will, especially as time moves on. Those moments of support over recent years allowed for a greater belief in myself. The future looks bright, and I'm excited for what is next. So I'm currently working on a bunch of new projects. What you're listening to now is the lead track off an album that I've just released called Reflective Hits, just under my own name. And it was made entirely on this machine here. It was made on this machine with some supportive elements as well. And along with Reflective Hits, I have several other projects underway as well. Earlier there was a score for Unifications. That's a work I made, kind of a long-form work for tone clusters, like very textural work. That will be released as the year progresses. I have several solo shows, one big show coming up actually at the Corner Hotel on the 31st, I think it is, where I'll be performing the music from another record which I've just completed. You would have heard a little bit of that music prior, or as doors opened, the music playing prior to this starting. That's another new project. I'm working across a variety of styles, still going deep into drumming. It's just time is a thing. Even though I've got a lot of time now, it's still hard to kind of jam to get everything done that I want to get done. The video you're seeing here is from the Heavy Spectra Ensemble, which was a performance we did for Melbourne Music Week at the end of 2021. Again, just a golden moment on the back of those hideous lockdowns. I managed to successfully pitch and get that event up at Max Watts in Melbourne, and it was just again a life. 2021 for me was just it was everything that I could have ever hoped for, really, as an artist. I had these amazing moments which I could kind of pivot off. I got to turn all these machines up really loud in a big rock venue, and it blew my mind. I loved it. In fact, the floor felt like it was lifting every time I did a filter sweep. All right, so anyway, look, if you're interested in what I'm doing now, what I've done in the past, or what I might be up to in the future, there's a sheet out there. You can go on the mailing list. I've set up an umbrella or a label called Eternal Music Projects, and that umbrella will exist now to not only release the music that I have backed up, which is always a case of having things you can never kind of get out fast enough, to release that, but also to begin supporting some other people as well. And I think this is something that means a lot to me, being able to see someone else's music kind of come to life physically. It happened for me, and I remember that feeling that I got. And it happened to me through events like this and through being able to perform at the Sydney My Music Bowl. So I want to pay that forward. So setting up Eternal Music Projects is very much about setting up something that I can channel the energy that I have into projects forever. So if you are interested in that, please go on the mailing list. All right. So I guess the big question is, now I've just done all that, have I completely overshared? Have I just revealed myself to be a big uncultured fool? Like this. Am I that self-interested and self-centered that I think anyone should care about any of this? Do you like crocodiles? So how does all this link together, and what the hell have I been banging on about? My life experiences and sensitivities make me who I am. I've created a world out of nothing more than instinct and made the most of those few moments that someone said yes. I've discovered my own lines of connection and meaning which are not necessarily straight. My story, like most stories, are a pointy, crooked, loopy, and imperfect line which has led me to where I am today. We all experience personal struggle relative to our individual circumstances. We all share in life's uncertainties, periods of hope, and moments of success. We make good and bad decisions, with bits we choose to celebrate and things we choose to ignore. Triumphant peaks and bits that don't reflect the chosen narrative or support our curated social media we sell to each other. These instruments inspire me to move forward and grow. The point at which I found them was the point at which things began to make sense. These machines inspire me to think bigger, dig deeper, share more, expand and do away with rigid thinking. And I found myself through these instruments. And their histories and their mysteries have become a point of fascination, connection and reflection. Their development dates back to the earliest experimentations in telecommunications and those radical futurist ideas of the early 20th century. These ideas continue to offer inspiration to connect and free our minds like a form of decoding. So it feels fitting now that this next clip should play, I think. Are we? Maybe not. I'll just tell you what it is. It's all right. I probably didn't have clearance to use it anyway. It was the THX intro to films, the big one that goes. Yeah, that was going to be the big zinger. Oh, there it is. Sorry. Okay, so in recent years, Stawell has somewhat reimagined itself with a world-leading dark matter lab established in the old mining tunnels. It seems the search for gold has given way to a search for meaning. The further I travel forward, the more I realise that the search for gold that was encoded in my DNA is actually just leading me to where I started. These instruments have become a porthole to my past and reveal my future. You can take the boy out of the bush, but these sounds are calling out to new and open ears, inspiring others to look a little deeper and explore a little further. If these machines are the tools to explore, then this deeper consciousness and community connection is the gold. In summary, tonight's presentation is another big step towards synthesizing the country life that shaped me with the city life that seduced me. Ultimately, those town hall battles have led to this moment, and I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity to share my meandering thoughts with you all. Thank you. Thank you. I just want to make a couple of a few people. I feel I've been incredibly fortunate to connect with people who've been that one person at one time or another in my life, and I want to mention them. But first, I want to acknowledge and say thanks to my family and the town that I still think of as home, and my beautiful partner Elizabeth. Yeah. So that one person over the years has been Sleepy, David Collinson and Richard Probert, who were my high school teachers who had no idea what to do with me. There was two of us that wanted to play music in school. And David Collinson used to drive me down, before the freeways were in, between Stawell and Melbourne. It was basically a 4-hour drive. He would drive me down to have a drum lesson with a guy named Smoothie. And Smoothie was a Salvation Army drummer. And David Collinson was heavily involved in the Salvation Army as well. So Dave and Richard just went above and beyond. I don't know anyone that would do that. There'd probably be laws against letting teachers drive their student to the city. John and Frank Corniola at Drum Tech. I remember sitting in my first audition to see whether I was going to get into Box Hill TAFE when I was 17, and having to audition for Frank Corniola, who was a big figure at that time. I watched Frank host the Ultimate Drummer Day in this room for many, many, many years, and always dreamed that I might get to play drums at one of those events. I never made the cut, but it's a really big, it feels really important. And it's been really nice to reconnect with John and Frank recently. Julie Wakefield at Dixon's Records. Now, Julie gave me my first full-time job as that LP cleaner. And she gave me that job because she found out that John Corniola was my drum teacher. Fast forward to Ollie Olsen. I was in a big, big black lost hole at that time, and connecting with Ollie gave me everything. It's not understating it. He introduced me to everyone. All of the big international stuff that I've been lucky enough to do is the result of Ollie backing me, and I'm eternally grateful for that. Kate Reed at It Records for putting out my only label release that I've ever had. Robin Fox and Byron Scullen at Mess, who gave me that opportunity to look after the synth mecca and get out of the truck, which was a very, very big moment. Anna Patterson at Melbourne Music Week, who said yes to the performance video you saw before. Creators Fund team at Creative Victoria, who gave me a gift in funding, 6 months of funding, which allowed me to do stuff that I'd never had time to really look at. It really was, it was like winning Tats Lotto. So I'm eternally grateful to Creative Victoria and the Creators Fund team. Naretha and Amanda and everyone here at Fuse and the City of Darebin. It's very surreal to be talking in this room to you all and to be sharing any of my thoughts at all with anyone. So thank you, Naretha and Amanda, for making that happen, and to my pal David. A massive love to my current collaborators, Ella and Band, Nat Grant, Underground Lovers, Peter Head, Pascal, Ollie, Lisa of Type Anti Girls. So thank you for listening. That's the end.